Chapter 10. Unbroken Truths.
Sky, come with me.
Skylar blinked in confusion, feeling the weight of his words as if they carried something more than a simple suggestion. Inside the filming trailer, Skylar and Irvin sat across from each other at a small table, and Skylar couldn't shake the feeling that it felt like an interrogation room. The air was thick with tension as Irvin's eyes softened, but his voice remained steady.
I'm not saying you meant to hurt Janet.
He started carefully.
But you did scare her the night before, and she was shaken up all evening. Now, with this happening.
His gaze was steady, trying to reach her without pushing her away. Skylar felt her cheeks flush with anger. That was just a prank. It has nothing to do with this incident.
But you were trying to get under her skin.
Irvin interrupted, his tone low but pointed.
You've never liked her, and you've made that clear, at least to me.
Frustration surged through Skylar, her jaw clenched. She never liked me either. And I didn't push that rig, Irvin. I wouldn't do something like that. Irvin studied her for a long moment, concern mingling with doubt in his expression.
Okay,
He said softly, the weight of his uncertainty heavy in the air.
but can you see why everyone's on edge? You and Janet, the history, the tension. Skylar, please.
Her defenses shot up, and hurt flashed in her eyes. I didn't touch it, she insisted firmly. You know me, Irvin. You know I wouldn't do something that reckless.
Even if you didn't do it, this has got to stop, Skylar.
He urged. Skylar shot up from her seat, frustration boiling over. Say that to Janet! She's the one trying to frame me! Irvin closed his eyes in frustration.
Sky, be reasonable. Sit down.
She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, but remained standing. Do you know why I was gone yesterday? She pressed, her voice softer now, but the fire still simmering beneath.
Let's not go off topic.
Irvin said, but Skylar could see the flicker of curiosity in his eyes. I went to see Henry, she replied in a severe tone. The intruder who got his way into Janet's room. Irvin narrowed his brows, recalling the man. Skylar continued. He told me something important. Janet wants him to meet her at her hotel room because she told him she loved him. The weight of her words hung in the air, shocking even her. Irvin's expression shifted, surprise mixing with confusion.
Why would she do that?
Because it's all part of her scheme, Skylar explained, her frustration bubbling back to the surface. She planned all that facade so that she could spend the night with you in your room. Irvin's eyes widened, his mind racing as he processed what she said.
Are you serious?
Skylar nodded, her determination rising. I'm sure. I confronted Henry and he told me everything. Janet is not innocent in this. She's the one who's been scheming all along. Irvin looked at her, uncertainty still flickering in his eyes.
But this is a serious accusation, Skylar.
Her heart sank at his words, disappointment washing over her like a cold wave. What about her accusation towards me? Is that not serious? The words slipped out, sharp and cutting, and she could see their impact on him. Irvin's expression shifted as he slowly stood up, the weight of her statement hitting him like a punch to the gut. He hadn't meant to make her feel less important, but now he could see how his doubt had affected her.
Sky, I didn't mean it like that.
Skylar stepped back, frustration and hurt boiling beneath the surface. You're willing to entertain her lies, but when it comes to me, you need proof? I can't believe you're putting her above me.
That's not what I meant.
Irvin exclaimed, stepping around the table to Skylar, his voice earnest. Skylar's eyes glistened with unshed tears, and the vulnerability in her gaze made his heart ache.
I'm sorry.
He said, his tone filled with regret.
I just didn't realize how my words would come across. I don't think Janet is more important than you. I care about you.
It doesn't feel that way, she said quietly, her voice breaking. Irvin's heart raced in his chest as she moved toward the door, a mix of desperation and fear coursing through him. He quickly stepped forward and grasped her arm.
No, Sky. Wait. You can't leave like this.
Irvin, she said, her voice strained, pulling her arm free from his grip. The hurt in her eyes felt like a knife to his heart. She fumbled through her pocket, pulled out a small card, and placed it on the counter with a trembling hand. Henry is on probation for 3 days, she said, her voice steady but laced with emotion. He'll be released tomorrow. The card has his number. He said he's willing to spill everything to whoever believes him. The weight of her words settled heavily in the room, and it was almost hard to breathe. If you believe Janet, you can throw away the card. Irvin's breath caught in his throat. The resolve in her eyes was both fierce and vulnerable, and he could see the disappointment etched across her features.
Sky, I don't want you to think I'm choosing her over you.
He pleaded, his voice thick with emotion.
I'm sorry. I made a mistake.
Her gaze softened for a moment, but the hurt lingered. It doesn't feel that way, Irvin. You're giving her the benefit of the doubt while I'm left fighting for my name. Irvin could feel his chest tighten as he watched her, as if the tiny gap between them was growing wider.
Please don't walk away.
He urged, his voice breaking slightly.
You're so important to me. I need you to know that.
Tears glimmered in her eyes as she looked down at the card.
I'll talk to Henry.
He quickly said, determination washing over him.
It's because I believe you, Sky, but please, don't shut me out.
Skylar's shoulders slumped slightly. I needed some fresh air. Then she stepped out of the trailer. Skylar sat in the car with Ethan, the weight of unspoken accusations pressing down on her.
You're right,
said Ethan.
Janet is more dangerous than anyone could imagine.
Skylar leaned her head back on her passenger seat. I told you.
Even Irvin is hesitant to believe you.
Ethan shook his head.
This is not good, Miss Katz. Are you sure this guy Irvin is worth your love?
Skylar let out a heavy sigh, glancing out the window as the set faded into the distance. The weight of the situation pressed down on her, and Ethan's words only made it heavier. I don't know anymore, Skylar admitted, her headache increasing. It feels like everything's slipping away, and here I am, fighting against a losing battle. Ethan tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his eyes focused on the road ahead.
She's manipulative, Skylar. If she can turn everyone against you, she'll do it. And right now, it looks like she's winning.
Skylar turned to Ethan, barely opening her eyes. But Irvin said he believes me. Ethan shook his head.
Believing isn't the same as trusting. Right now, Irvin's caught between you and Janet, and she's making sure she's the one who comes out on top. If you're not careful, you're going to get burned.
Skylar leaned her head back against the seat, closing her eyes as a wave of exhaustion washed over her. I have a headache. Ethan placed his hand to Skylar's forehead.
All of the stuff going on, I don't doubt it. You should go rest in your room.
Skylar nodded. Irvin spent the entire day feeling a deep emptiness without Skylar by his side. After their tense conversation, he couldn't shake the worry that had settled in his chest, guilt gnawing at him for how things had ended. The crew moved through their tasks, but his mind kept drifting back to their earlier exchange, replaying it over and over. He glanced around the set, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. As the hours passed, he noticed how her absence affected the atmosphere. It felt heavy and strained. Irvin tried to focus on his work, directing scenes and giving feedback, but his thoughts kept wandering back to her. He checked the time repeatedly, wondering if she was nearby or deliberately avoiding him. Janet caught up to Irvin as he was heading out of the set, falling into step beside him.
Irvin, I was thinking maybe you and I could go over the script together later. I have a few ideas I think you'll really like.
Irvin sighed, his patience thinning.
Janet, I'm swamped. Maybe talk to the script team if you have ideas. That's their job.
She tried to keep her smile intact, undeterred.
Sure, but I thought it'd be better coming from me directly. You know, we have such a good dynamic.
He stopped walking, turning to face her with a hint of frustration in his eyes.
Janet, I really don't have the time for this.
His tone was clipped, his attention drifting as he checked his phone.
If it's not critical, can we just... not right now?
Janet's smile faltered, but she pressed on, her voice softening.
I just thought maybe you'd appreciate some company. You seem stressed.
Yeah, I am.
He replied bluntly, running a hand through his hair.
And you're not helping. Look, I don't need any distractions right now, all right?
He glanced around, hoping the conversation would end, his mind already returning to his concerns about Skylar. Janet watched, realizing with frustration that his thoughts were somewhere far away from her, and he didn't care to hide it. As Irvin sat down for dinner, his eyes instinctively scanned the room, searching for Skylar's familiar face, but no figure of her.
Where's Skylar?
He asked, glancing over at Ethan, who sat nearby. Ethan shrugged casually.
I haven't seen her all day. I think she's still upset about the whole rig incident.
Irvin's chest tightened with guilt. He hadn't handled things well. Ethan silently observed Irvin's reaction.
She didn't do it. You know that, right?
Ethan's voice broke through Irvin's thoughts. Irvin nodded, hating himself.
Yeah, I know.
Ethan leaned back, a thoughtful look crossing his face.
I was actually the one who called her phone that time. She'd lost it, and it turned up right where the whole incident happened. Strange, isn't it? Bad timing, too. But no one's buying her side of things. She's probably just keeping a low profile, trying to avoid all the drama.
Without another word, Ethan stood up and walked away, leaving Irvin drowning in a sea of guilt and uncertainty. His mind replayed the moment Skylar had desperately told everyone she was looking for her phone. The weight of his guilt grew heavier with each thought. How could he have doubted her? The realization that she had been hurting, and that in her moment of need he hadn't fully believed her, gnawed at him relentlessly. Irvin stood outside Skylar's hotel room, hand hovering near the door, torn between knocking and respecting her space. Knowing she needed rest, he hesitated and decided it might be better to wait until tomorrow to talk things through. In the morning, no Skylar again. Irvin pulled out his phone, his fingers hovering over the screen as he tried to find the right words. Finally, he typed,
Sky, I'm worried about you. Please don't ignore me. We need to talk. Just let me know you're okay.
He hit send, staring at the message, hoping for a response, his heart heavy with concern. After what felt like an eternity, Irvin's phone buzzed. His heart skipped as he saw Skylar's name flash on the screen. With a shaky breath, he opened the message. I'm okay, Irvin. Don't worry. Irvin exhaled deeply at her text, the tension in his chest easing a bit. He ran a hand through his hair and sighed in relief, grateful she had responded, though the emptiness of her words still gnawed at him. Irvin arrived at the small diner where Henry had agreed to meet him over the phone. Scanning the booths, he stepped inside until he spotted Henry nervously fidgeting with a cup of coffee. Now that Irvin could see him clearly, the fan looked nothing like the intruder that night. He was just a guy with wide eyes, looking more anxious than dangerous. Irvin walked over, pulling out the chair across from him.
Henry?
The fan nodded quickly, eyes darting around like waiting for someone to jump out at him.
Yes, that's me.
Irvin took a seat and leaned forward, bracing his arms on the table.
I'm Irvin, the one who reached out to you. I need you to walk me through everything that happened with Janet.
Henry swallowed hard, his hands gripping his coffee.
I never meant for any of this to happen, I swear. I was just a fan following her schedule. I'd show up at events hoping to catch a glimpse of her. She's always been so kind to her fans, but I never thought she'd notice me like that.
Irvin narrowed his eyes, his patience thin but his curiosity piqued.
Notice you how?
Henry's face flushed, and he glanced down at the table.
She came straight up to me, We talked, just her and me. It was unreal. She told me she appreciated how dedicated I was as a fan.
He paused, fiddling with his cup.
She said she liked me a lot, more than just as a fan.
Irvin's jaw tightened, suspicion creeping in.
And she asked you to come to her hotel?
Henry nodded eagerly, his face brightening with the memory.
Yeah. She told me to meet her in her hotel room and that she wanted to see me in private. I couldn't believe it. She gave me her room number and said she wanted to talk away from the cameras and everything.
Irvin's stomach churned as he listened, piecing the story together.
So you went?
Henry's excitement faded, replaced by guilt.
Yeah, I thought it was my chance. But then everything went wrong. I don't know why it turned into this whole mess. The next thing I knew, everyone was freaking out, and I got so confused.
Irvin's voice was tight as he asked,
And you're sure she invited you? It wasn't some misunderstanding?
Henry looked up at him, eyes wide and sincere.
I swear, she told me herself. She wanted me to come. I'm not making this up. I'd never do anything to hurt her. I thought she liked me.
Irvin leaned back, the weight of the revelation settling in. He believed Henry. It wasn't hard to see that this fan had been caught in a web of manipulation. But the bigger picture left Irvin feeling sick. Janet had used Henry to orchestrate this whole situation, making it look like an intrusion. And in doing so, she'd made Skylar look even more suspicious in everyone else's eyes. Irvin stood up, his mind reeling.
Thanks, Henry. You've helped more than you know.
Henry looked up at him, a glimmer of hope in his eyes.
No, really. Thank you for believing in me. And please tell Miss Katz. It's because of her I was able to pull myself together. I honestly thought I was done for.
Irvin froze.
What do you mean?
Henry shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his gaze falling to the table.
Miss Skylar, she stopped me from doing something stupid.
He admitted quietly.
When I was in that cell, I was falling apart. Everyone thought I was just some creep, a stalker. I felt completely trapped, like no one would believe me. Even I was starting to doubt myself.
Irvin's chest tightened, a knot forming in his throat.
You're saying Skylar saved you?
Henry nodded, his voice unsteady.
Yeah. I was really close to giving up, you know. Thought there was no reason to keep going. The guards didn't care, no one did. But then, she came to see me. She was the first person who actually listened, who looked at me like I was more than just a label.
Henry's voice softened as he spoke about Skylar, his gaze distant, yet filled with a quiet admiration.
She didn't just dismiss me or look at me like some crazy guy. She actually listened,
he said, his tone carrying a weight of disbelief.
Skylar watched me, paid attention to how I acted, what I said. She looked past everything people had labeled me as and saw me.
He took a shaky breath.
No one's ever done that before. She treated me like I was human. I could see in her eyes that she was willing to believe me, not because I convinced her, but because she understood. She listened, really listened, and that made all the difference. She talked me down when I was at rock bottom. I was ready to end it, man.
His voice dropped to barely a whisper.
She pulled me back from that ledge. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't still be here.
Henry, if you give up now, it won't prove anything. It'll only let them believe whatever they want to about you. But if you stay here, if you keep going, that's how you show them they're wrong.
They've already decided who I am. No one will listen. What's the point?
The point is that you know the truth, and if you walk away from that now, no one will ever have a reason to question the lies. But if you're here, alive and willing to be heard, even if just one person listens, that's a step toward proving them all wrong. A soft sigh escaped Irvin's lips, a smile blooming as he absorbed Henry's words. He couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of pride he felt for Skylar. The way she had stood by Henry, offering him the kindness and understanding he desperately needed, revealed just how special she was. She had this incredible ability to see beyond the surface, to connect with people on a level that most couldn't.